He said I was convenient. That was the word he used. Not beautiful, not kind, not the woman he loved. Convenient. I wasn't supposed to hear that. He didn't know I was standing in the hallway, still in my coat, grocery bags in both hands, keys between my fingers. He was on the phone with his college friend Paxton, laughing the way men laugh when they think no one is listening. Easy, loose, like the truth costs nothing. I set the bags down on the floor without making a sound. I'd been with Clifton for 4 years. We'd moved in together after 2. I had a ring on my finger, a princess cut, platinum band, the kind he'd let me pick out myself because he said he wanted to make sure I loved it. I did love it. I loved everything about what I thought we were building. I stood in that hallway for 3 full minutes, maybe longer. I'm not sure time works normally when the floor is dropping out from under you. Let me back up because the ending makes more sense when you understand the beginning. I met Clifton at a work conference in Atlanta. I was 31. He was 34. I worked in healthcare administration at a mid-sized hospital network in Charlotte, and he was in commercial real estate. Different worlds, but something clicked. He was smart, he was composed, and he made me feel like the most interesting person in the room. I'm not naive. I know that's a skill some men practice. But at 31, after 2 long relationships that had ended quietly and without drama, I was ready to believe it was real. We dated long distance for 8 months. He flew to Charlotte. I drove to Raleigh. We split every trip down the middle. That mattered to me. I've always been the kind of woman who notices who's keeping score, not in a petty way, but because it tells you something about how a person sees partnership. By the time he asked me to move in with him, I had already started loving him in that deep, structural way. The kind where the other person becomes part of how you plan your life. I transferred my lease to a friend, packed my things into a moving truck, and became, officially, a woman who had built something with someone. My best friend Laurette told me to slow down. Not because she didn't like Clifton. She did, mostly, but because she said I had a tendency to see people as who they were working to become instead of who they actually were. I laughed at her. I said Clifton wasn't a project. I said he was already the person I needed him to be. I think about that a lot now. We got engaged 14 months after I moved in. He proposed at the restaurant where we had our first dinner together. Not in Atlanta, but a French bistro in Raleigh that we'd driven to on our 3rd date, just because I mentioned I was craving steak frites. He'd called ahead. There were flowers. It was the kind of proposal that means he paid attention. I called my mother from the parking lot, shaking, crying, laughing. She said, "Baby, I am so happy for you." And she meant it. My mother had been widowed when I was 16, and she'd spent the last 15 years telling me, gently but clearly, that she hoped I would find someone who chose me on purpose. She said that was the only kind of choosing that counted. I thought Clifton had chosen me on purpose. We started planning almost immediately. The wedding was set for the following October. We'd agreed on something intimate. Under 100 people, maybe a vineyard venue outside Asheville, the kind of setting that felt personal instead of performative. I started a shared folder in Google Drive where I dropped venue links, florist ideas, color palettes. He told me to handle most of the details because I had better taste. I didn't think anything of that at the time. I liked planning. I was good at it. What I wasn't as good at was noticing when I was the only one invested. We had a joint checking account. I want to address this directly because I know someone out there is already asking why, and it's a fair question. We'd opened it after I moved in to handle shared expenses, utilities, groceries, the mortgage payment on his place that we split down the middle. It felt practical. We were building a life. And honestly, at the time, it felt like proof of something. That we were serious, that we were in it together. I kept my own savings account separate, and my direct deposits still went there. But the joint account had about $11,000 in it by the time everything fell apart. Money I'd put in. Money we were both supposed to be using. The fall before the wedding, I noticed Clifton getting quieter. I told myself it was work stress. Commercial real estate in the Carolinas had been turbulent all year, rates up, deals stalling. He came home distracted. He went to bed before me most nights. He stopped asking about my day with the same curiosity he used to have. I told Laurette, and she said, "That's what long-term relationships look like. People get comfortable. It doesn't mean something's wrong." I believed her because I wanted to. It was a Tuesday in September when I heard it. I'd left work early. My migraine had been building since noon, and by 3 o'clock I couldn't look at a screen anymore. I called Clifton on the drive home, and he didn't pick up. I figured he was in a meeting. I stopped at the grocery store anyway, picked up what we needed, came home. His car was in the driveway, which surprised me. I thought he had a client dinner. I unlocked the front door quietly, not on purpose. I just wasn't making an effort to be loud. He was in the kitchen. I could hear him before I could see him, his voice carrying the way it does when he's comfortable, not performing. "I mean, come on. She's not going anywhere," he was saying. "That's the whole point. She moved here for me. All her stuff is here. I'm basically all she has in this city." A pause. Then, "No, she's fine. She's easy. She doesn't ask a lot of questions." Another pause. "Pax, I've got the account set up right. When the Henderson deal closes, I move the money before she has time to look at the statements. It's not complicated. She trusts me." I didn't breathe. "She's good people," Clifton said, and the way he said it, like that was a consolation. Like goodness was what you said about something useful. But I can't do 30 years of this. I need more. I just need to get through the wedding first, get the assets sorted, then we'll see. I stood in the hallway with grocery bags cutting into my palms, and I did not move. He laughed at something Paxton said. That easy, loose laugh. I set the bags down. I walked back out the front door. I got in my car. I drove to a coffee shop 3 miles away, and I sat in the parking lot for 45 minutes trying to understand what I had just heard. I want to tell you I cried. I did eventually. But not then. Sitting in that parking lot, what I felt first was something cold and very clear, the kind of clarity you get when the last piece of a puzzle locks in, and suddenly the whole picture makes sense in a way that makes you furious at yourself for not seeing it sooner. The distraction. The early bedtimes. The way he'd recently moved most of his individual investment account discussions to phone calls he took at the office. The Henderson deal he'd mentioned twice, but never explained. All of it rearranging itself in my mind into something I did not want to see. I didn't go back to the house that night. I texted Clifton that I was staying with a friend because of the migraine. He replied, "Feel better, babe," with a heart emoji. I stared at that emoji for a long time. I slept on Laurette's couch. I told her enough, not everything, because I was still fitting pieces together. And she handed me a blanket and said, "What do you need?" That's all she said. Not "I told you so," not "you should have listened to me." Just, "What do you need?" What I needed was information. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I logged into our joint account online. I had full access, my name was on it, and I pulled up 3 months of statements. I found it on the 2nd month, a recurring transfer. Small enough that I might have missed it if I wasn't looking. $400 a month, going out to an account I didn't recognize. Different from any bill we had. Not a subscription, not an auto payment I'd set up, an account number I'd never seen. I wrote the number down. Then I went looking for the Henderson deal. I searched Clifton's name in the County Register of Deeds. Public record. Anyone can access it, and I found a property transaction pending on a commercial building in Durham. His name was listed. So was another name I didn't know. Colleen Baird. I typed that name into LinkedIn. She was a real estate attorney in Raleigh. Her profile was sparse, but her connection to a firm Clifton had mentioned twice in passing was right there. I'm not going to tell you exactly how much I figured out in those 72 hours, because some of it is still working through legal channels. But what I understood, sitting at Laurette's kitchen table with 3 days' worth of coffee cups around me, was this. Clifton had been structuring things. The joint account, the pending deal, the way he'd slowly positioned himself as the primary contact for anything financial in our life. He wasn't planning a wedding. He was planning an exit. One that left him better off and left me wondering where the money went. I called a lawyer before I called anyone else. Her name was Janet Osei-Bonsu, a family law and financial fraud attorney in Charlotte who came recommended by a colleague. I sat across from her in her office on a Thursday afternoon and I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. Then she asked me 6 questions I hadn't thought to ask myself. Then she said, "You're right to be here." That's all I needed to hear. We had a dinner party scheduled for the following Saturday. Clifton's idea, he liked to host, liked being the person people came to. His friends Paxton and Deanna were coming, 2 couples from his real estate network, my friend Laurette, and Clifton's older sister, Adeze, who I genuinely loved and who had no idea what her brother had been doing. I thought about canceling. I thought about saying nothing. I thought about pulling Clifton aside privately, having it out, giving him a chance to explain. And then I thought about what he'd said. She doesn't ask a lot of questions. I decided I had some questions after all. I went home Friday evening like nothing had changed. I cooked dinner. I smiled at the right times. Clifton seemed relaxed, maybe even relieved. I think my headache excuse had made him feel safe. I kissed him on the cheek before bed, and I lay awake in the dark, counting the hours until Saturday evening. I had spoken to Janet 3 times by then. She had advised me very specifically on what I could and could not do with the joint account before taking any action. I withdrew my documented contributions. I had all the deposit records and transferred them back to my personal account. She said that was within my rights. She said to keep every record. I kept everything. Saturday came. The house smelled like the cedar candles I'd put out and the rosemary chicken I'd started at 4. People arrived at 7. Clifton was in a good mood, charming, generous, the version of himself that had made me fall in love with him. He poured drinks. He laughed at everyone's stories. He put his arm around me twice, and both times I smiled. We sat down to dinner around 8. Paxton was there, which was the part that mattered. The conversation drifted the way dinner party conversations do. Work, travel, a new restaurant someone had been to, a home renovation that had gone over budget. Clifton mentioned the Henderson deal in passing, something about closing timelines. I set down my fork. "Clifton," I said, "before we get into that, I actually have something I want to say while everyone's here. People I love." He looked at me. Something shifted in his face, just slightly. "I've decided I can't marry you," I said, "and I want everyone here to know why, because some of you are people I care about, and I don't want there to be any confusion about what happened." The table went very quiet. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I told them, calmly, what I had heard Clifton say to Paxton in our kitchen on Tuesday. I looked at Paxton when I said it. His face went the color of old chalk. I told them about the transfers I'd found. I told them about the property filing. I told them that I had already spoken to a lawyer and that I had already moved my money. I told them that I was sharing this publicly because I knew, from experience, that when a woman walks away from a man like this quietly, the story gets rewritten. I didn't want my story rewritten. Adeze put her hand over her mouth. She looked at her brother like she was seeing something for the first time. He said my name once, Brianna, and I shook my head. "I'm done," I said. "I'm going to finish my chicken because I made it and it's good, and then I'm going to leave." And that's what I did. I moved out the following week. Laurette and her husband helped me pack a truck. I had more than I thought. 5 years of a life tends to accumulate that way. I put most of it in a storage unit while I got situated in a short-term rental. The legal process took longer than the moving. Janet was thorough, and Clifton's attorney was the kind of man who thought delay was a strategy. But what Clifton hadn't counted on was that I am, professionally, a person who manages systems and documents for a living. I had records, I had timestamps, I had deposit histories and account statements, and a property search I'd printed and dated. I had the joint account records showing exactly what I had contributed and when. I won't say every dollar came back to me perfectly, because that's not how these things work. But I walked away better than he had planned for me to walk away. Janet made sure of that. The Henderson deal fell through. I didn't do anything to make that happen. It just did. I heard it secondhand from a Daisy, who still calls me sometimes. She apologized on behalf of her family, which she didn't need to do, but I let her, because it meant something. What I know now that I didn't know then is that convenient is not a compliment. Convenient means you've made yourself small enough to fit into someone else's plan. It means you've been mistaken for furniture. I was good to Clifton. I was a good partner. I showed up. I kept things running. I loved him, without making him earn it the way he should have had to. That's not a character flaw. That's just what trust looks like before someone breaks it. The ring is gone. I don't know what he did with it. I left it on the kitchen counter when I came back to pack. I didn't want it. I didn't want anything that came from that version of my life. What I kept, the name of a good attorney, the knowledge that my instincts had been right all along, even when I talked myself out of them, and a deposit receipt for the first month's rent on my own apartment, in a building 2 miles from Laurette, with big south-facing windows and a parking spot with my name on the lease. Just my name. I signed it on a Friday afternoon in November, and I sat in the empty living room afterward, with takeout I'd picked up on the way and ate it on the floor because I didn't have furniture yet, and I thought, this is mine. Every corner of it, every square foot. I wasn't convenient here, I was home.